Hello again, and in this video we're going to finish our lecture series on Chapter 2, Normative Theories. And in this video we're really going to talk about deontological or non-consequentialist theories. Like with teleological theories, the text really highlights two different theories within the deontological realm. And the first one was introduced by Immanuel Kant and his categorical imperative. And what the categorical imperative says is that you know if something is ethical or not based on whether you're okay with it becoming universal law. If you are not okay with it becoming universal law, then you know it's the wrong thing to do. So the interesting thing about his theory is that really nobody could say, or have the excuse, I didn't know that was wrong. Because if you're not okay with it becoming universal law, meaning it's okay for everyone to do, then you know it's wrong. You know lying is wrong because you're not okay with me lying to you or anybody else lying to you. You know cheating on a test is wrong because you're not okay with people cheating you. So that's really the crux of his, that you know, and again, one of the tough things is, that doesn't mean that people won't do the wrong thing. It just means that they know it's wrong because they're not okay with everybody doing it and it being accepted as universal law. He did caveat that by adding to all rational beings, so he left out people in the mental institution and things like that didn't have rational behavior. But that's basically what his theory kind of went into. Now, as I said, in all of these, you need to know what it is, how to apply it, and the argument against it. And there is a fairly large argument against this. And that is, he believed that that we had a priori knowledge of ethics, which really means that we have innate knowledge of ethics, that we know from birth the difference between right and wrong. So the downside is that if you believe that ethics are learned, in other words, your parents had to teach you right from wrong, then really there can be no universal law, because worldwide everybody would be in a different culture and think that things that you might believe are right are wrong, and things you might believe are wrong are right. So this is an interesting argument, and I have a son who graduated from Emory University as a psychology major, and one of the experiments they did, which kind of relates to this, especially if your gut tells you that ethics are learned. And they did an experiment with monkeys, and they had two monkeys that were side by side in a cage. And they were feeding them nuts, and everything was fine. And a few days after just feeding them nuts, they started feeding one grapes, and the other one kept with the nuts. And apparently, monkeys like grapes much better than nuts. But so what happened was, the monkey that was eating the grapes kept eating the grapes and having a good time, but the monkey that had the nuts stopped eating and wouldn't eat at all. And then they switched back to both of them getting nuts, and the other monkey still wouldn't eat the nuts until he got grapes. So the interesting thing with this was, did somebody have to teach fairness to those two monkeys? Or did the one monkey who got the nuts the entire time, did he have an innate knowledge of right and wrong or fairness, which we'll get to in chapter 3, but did somebody have to teach them that and say, you should stop eating because? No, nobody did that. So did these two monkeys have this innate knowledge of right and wrong, fairness or not fairness, or did that have to be taught? And if monkeys don't have to be taught it, do we need to be taught it? So again, just an interesting caveat to this idea that are ethics innate in humans, or do we have to be taught? Because I will say that Kant's theory falls apart if ethics are taught, because you can't have a universal law. The only way you can have a universal law is if that ethics are innate, and that way we all know. Again, that doesn't mean that people won't do the wrong thing. It just means that they know it's wrong because they're not okay with it either A, happening to them, or being accepted by everybody as okay. So that's Kant's theory, and the other one is by Ross, and his theory was really an argument against Kant's. And he used more of a prima facie argument, which really means just at first glance, his seems too basic. And that Ross argued that there's really a stacked ranking of ethical values. And that in many cases, you have a choice between two. And you wouldn't want either one of them to become universal law. If it's a choice between lying or saving somebody's life, well, you don't want not saving somebody's life or lying to become universal law. Yet my guess is if you had to lie to save somebody's life, we all would argue that that is a higher ethical value, and therefore that's what you should do. Now Ross argued this, and I don't know that Kant would necessarily disagree. They didn't live at the same time, but I think most of us would be okay with that becoming universal law. That it is okay to lie to save somebody's life. So again, I don't know that they would necessarily disagree, but that was really Ross's argument to kind of argue against Kant. With his, the argument is kind of a similar argument to Kant, that again, if ethics aren't innate in us, can we all have the same stack rank of ethical values? So those are really the two deontological theories that you should know for the class that are introduced in Chapter 2. In the next video, we will be moving on to Chapter 3, which is all about justice and fairness.